I think this show should be called Two Stabs in the Back of Russia. There has never been any love between Baku and Moscow. There was the political wisdom of a small state next to an aggressive neighbor, and the small state endured, gritting its teeth, smiling, knowing that it was only a matter of time. And now the time has come.
While the attention of the whole world was focused on Ukraine, something grand is unfolding to the south of the Russian border. Azerbaijan has openly rebelled against Moscow. The conflict began last year when Russian forces downed an Azerbaijani civilian aircraft, killing dozens. Recently, the situation worsened further. In a shocking incident, 2 Azerbaijani citizens died in Russian custody, reportedly after being tortured. That was the point of no return.
But these 2 murders, dozens of passengers, and 2 ordinary citizens of Azerbaijani nationality in Moscow just brought the situation to a boiling point, and the leadership of Azerbaijan decided that the moment had come and did not stop the people, enraged by the actions of the Russians.
But the diplomatic tension between Russia and Azerbaijan is increasing.
Recently, Russian authorities conducted a major police operation, arresting over 50 individuals, including ethnic Azerbaijanis and Russian citizens of Azerbaijani descent. Azerbaijan launched major repressions in response, arresting prominent Russian state media figures and closing Russian cultural centers nationwide. But that's not all. Although tensions with Moscow are rising, Baku is quietly building new military alliances with Israel, Turkey, and the United States. With their support, Azerbaijan is becoming stronger.
An interesting combination. Israel, Turkey, the United States. Israel has issues with Istanbul, and for Baku there's Erdogan. Well, like an older, caring brother. Nevertheless, both the brother and the Jew supplied the Azeris with weapons, provided training, and shared intelligence in the fight against Russia. And Moscow used the Armenians as a guard dog. I understand that Armenians might not like this definition, but I'm not talking about Armenians themselves. I'm talking about how they were used by the Russian side without considering their own needs. That's how I would put it. But today, Armenia is no longer so dependent on the Kremlin and is quietly starting to pursue its own policy instead of carrying out the tasks set by the Moscow puppet masters. But let's look at recent history.
In 1991, when the Soviet Union finally collapsed, Azerbaijan became independent. But independence did not mean stability. Azerbaijan was quickly drawn into a brutal conflict with Armenia over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. This Azerbaijani territory was predominantly populated by ethnic Armenians.
Russia immediately began to inflame the conflict, promising the Armenians help in exchange for loyalty. Shortly before that, in January 1990, on the night of the 19th to the 20th, back then Soviet troops entered Baku to suppress the anti-Karabakh protests. 175 people from Baku were killed, crushed by tanks, or shot. They were buried in the Alley of Martyrs in Baku on May 8, 1992. Hero of Azerbaijan, Tank Commander Albert Aronovich Agarunov, a Jew by nationality, died at the hands of Armenians using Russian weapons while defending Azerbaijan's positions. Muslims erected a monument to him in the center of Baku. The only monument to a Jew in the Muslim world stands in Baku on one of the central squares. All of Azerbaijan knows that the mountain Jews defended the country from Russian invaders and occupiers. Azerbaijan is an amazingly multinational country where no one except Armenians, due to historical circumstances now, and Russians, by the way, ever had any hostility, probably for many hundreds of years. In the Caucasus, there is even a little Jerusalem called Krasnaya Sloboda. Jews began to settle in the territory of Azerbaijan as early as the centuries AD, I think, centuries of our era. In the century, more precisely in the year 1731, the Persians tried to capture the Caucasus, and many Jewish settlements were ravaged and destroyed. Khan Hussein announced that representatives of all the destroyed Jewish communities could settle in the city of Guba. I apologize if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. To build a synagogue to replace the destroyed one and to form a community. That's how the 12 synagogues of Krasnaya Sloboda appeaed. I was there. I visited them all. Some are already working, while others are being restored or are not yet functional. Sigurdsson and his son Fatali believed that the natural talents of Jews in finance and commerce would help the development of their state. And by the way, they were right. Later in the 19th century, representatives of these communities moved to Baku and developed Baku's connections with the outside world.
Azerbaijan grew more assertive, bolstering its alliance with Turkey, a regional power and NATO member. It also started working more closely with Israel, particularly in military technology. Israeli drones significantly contributed to Azerbaijan's triumph over Armenia in the 2020 war. This was a key moment because it showed that Baku no longer needed to rely on Russian weapons. Meanwhile, Russia's influence started to decline. The 2022 Ukraine invasion shifted focus and resources from the South Caucasus, granting Baku increased autonomy. All this time, Azerbaijan's economy has been booming in recent years, and the numbers prove it. In 2024, gross domestic product grew by 4.6%, and the non-oil sector increased by more than 7%. This momentum continues, with 2025 forecasts showing 3.5% growth and an expected gross domestic product of nearly $75 billion. Energy exports, trade routes, and foreign investments are driving Azerbaijan into a new period of economic power. Do you know what that means? Less and less dependence on Moscow.
And the son of Haydar Aliyev, the current leader of the country, it's not exactly a democracy there, decided that the moment for separation had come.
As well. And this time, the government took even harsher measures. Russian media outlets were shut down and even journalists connected to Moscow were arrested. The Sputnik office in Baku was reportedly a center for the Russian Federal Security Service. Russian-language schools and cultural centers were shut down. Small events like Russian film nights or language courses were cancelled as the country gradually aligned with the United States, Israel, and Turkey. These countries were chosen strategically, as their goals align with Azerbaijan's objectives. They all want to maintain stability in the South Caucasus, counter Iran's influence, and make the most of Azerbaijani oil and gas. Europe needs this gas to heat homes and keep factories running, and this puts Azerbaijan in a stronger position than ever before. Energy export revenues also help Azerbaijan in other ways. This is used to improve roads, trade routes, and the army. And since Europe now sees Azerbaijan as a key energy partner, they also talk more about security and regional cooperation. The 2024 shootdown accelerated these negotiations. Europe saw that Russia was no longer reliable and turned to Baku. This shift gave Azerbaijan more of a voice in European politics and made it harder for Russia to resist. Energy is not the sole reason for the significance of this new alliance. Military support also plays a crucial role. Israel has been a crucial partner to Azerbaijan in this domain. During the wars in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2020 and 2023, Azerbaijan used Israeli drones and weapons to reclaim territories. These tools significantly advantaged Azerbaijan on the battlefield. Following the 2024 plane incident, the two nations increased cooperation, initiating discussions on air defense systems and exchanging intelligence data. Israel sees Azerbaijan as a key partner due to its border with Iran, enabling easier monitoring of Iran's activities. This military partnership has grown stronger over time, and perhaps this is where the drama begins for Iran. In June 2025, Israel unexpectedly attacked Iran, striking several military and nuclear facilities across the country. The strikes were swift and targeted, catching many by surprise. But what really escalated the situation was the question of where these attacks could have come from. Iran believes that Israel used the territory or airspace of Azerbaijan to carry out the operation. This statement immediately increased tensions between Iran and Azerbaijan. During the attack, residents of northern Iran, especially in areas close to the border with Azerbaijan, reported seeing drones and hearing airplanes in the sky. Some even said they saw drones coming from the direction of Azerbaijan. At the same time, residents of Nakhchivan, which is a part of Azerbaijan separated from the rest of the country, also reported unusual aerial activity. Iran quickly accused Baku, claiming that it allowed Israel to use its territory or airspace to carry out strikes. As expected, Iranian leaders demanded answers from Azerbaijan, accusing it of aiding Israel. The Iranian president phoned the Azerbaijani president, requesting an explanation. The Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs also made public statements, warning that it would not tolerate any cooperation between Baku and Tel Aviv that threatens Iranian security. But Azerbaijan denied everything. It stated that the accusations were false and that it had nothing to do with the attacks. Nevertheless, the timing and reports on the ground made Iran very suspicious.
Wouldn't doubt that Azerbaijan helped Israel, just as Israel helped Aliyev to seize Nagorno-Karabakh. Turkey wasn't against it, the United States wasn't against it, and Baku had already chosen its friends, which means the positions were set and Russia lost another former ally. By the way, I have to tell you that Azerbaijan is one of the most tolerant countries in the world, in my opinion. In 2013, I was invited as an observer for the presidential elections in Azerbaijan, and Erkan Aliyev received, I think, 86% of the votes in this early election. And we, the observers, did not notice any violations there. That is, although 86%, of course, might lead to certain thoughts, but also about something else. We found ourselves in the Shahidov Mosque, the Martyrs' Mosque. Shahid means martyr, built on the seashore, on a hill in Baku. The mosque is reached by that very alley of martyrs I already told you about. There are many Sunnis and Shiites in Baku, and those who died were both. And this is the only place I know in the world where a mosque is used by Shiites one day and by Sunnis the next. And during holidays, specifically, of course, Muslim holidays, as you understand, this very mosque, every 2 hours, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe even every hour. I think it's 2 hours for one group, 2 hours for the other, 2 hours for one, 2 hours for the other. There is another place in the world, I think, a mosque on the top of Mount Sinai, next to the Orthodox Chapel of the Holy Trinity, where people pray together or take turns, maybe representatives of all denominations of Islam, and that's it.
Even though Azerbaijan denied helping Israel, it also did not criticize the attack. This silence spoke volumes to Iran. It made Tehran think that Baku quietly supports Israel's actions, even if it doesn't openly admit it. The situation has become dangerous, as Iran now views Azerbaijan not only as a neighbor, but also as a potential threat.
Russia sees Azerbaijan as an enemy, and Iran sees Azerbaijan as a threat, an active one at that. And they are right. Aliyev has made his choice. The West and the people support him, support his strategy. Azerbaijan waited until Russia no longer had the strength to deal with the Caucasus, and then struck its blow. Before, this was called a stab in the back, but now it's called diplomacy. Now let's talk about another knife.
In Iran has the potential to completely paralyze Russia. There are several aspects of this conflict that directly threaten Russia's position on the world stage economically, geopolitically, militarily, and even demographically. Moreover, increased United States involvement, President Donald Trump has practically declared war on Iran, means that now Russia is in a more precarious position than ever before. Let's look at some of the most critical aspects that the Russian military machine could lose due to the ongoing bombings of Iran. First, unsurprisingly, Iran has been a stable supplier of drones for Russia. You see, once Ukraine was able to repel the initial invasion in the first few weeks after the attack on Kiev, the war turned into a war of attrition. Russia eagerly sent its people and outdated equipment into battle, hoping for success. But another weapon turned out to be much more effective in this task, drones, and Russia's drone capabilities turned out to be pitiful compared to Ukraine's rapidly growing fleet. Moscow was losing conventional missiles and precision weapons at an unacceptable rate. This led to drones becoming one of Iran's main export goods. Let's dive into the numbers. Between September 2022 and September 2024, Russia launched more than 8,000 Iranian Shahed drones at Ukrainian targets. These flying mopeds, as Ukrainians call them, have become central to Russia's terror campaign against Ukrainian civilians and infrastructure. Iran initially supplied Russia with up to 3,000 drones, mostly the Shahed model. The Shahed 136 costs $20,000 to $50,000 each, far less than the hundreds of thousands of dollars Ukraine spends on each interceptor missile used to shoot them down.
First, Iran sent drones. Second, Iran built a factory in Tatarstan. I think in Yelabuga, if I'm not mistaken, where Iranian engineers produce analogs of the Shahed drones. But for some reason, Russian engineers still can't replace the Iranians.
Iran can no longer afford to export Shahed drones to Russia, with Israeli F-35S and American stealth bombers targeting Iranian drone manufacturing facilities. Tehran desperately needs every drone for its own defense or deterrence.
Israel is bombing drone factories not only to protect its own territory, but also to help Ukraine. At the same time, Israel has proven that Russian air defense cannot see and, let's say, cannot prevent the bombing of protected territories. In other words, tens of billions of dollars spent by Iran have gone to waste. And the whole world sees that Russia has taken on the responsibility to protect, but in reality, it never actually tested them, meaning it lied about testing these systems against Israeli and American planes and missiles. It just blatantly lied. But as they say, it's nothing new for them. And now it's reaping the consequences of these and other deceptions. India doesn't seem to want Russian weapons anymore, and Vietnam has definitely switched to the United States side. Iran won't be able to, and won't really want to, place new orders. So who is left?
Should they continue to support Iran and risk China's displeasure, or abandon their Middle Eastern ally and accept the role of China's junior partner? In any case, the days when Russia could position itself as a direct ideological opponent of NATO, especially Europe, are numbered. The reason why China is interested in maintaining good relations with the Middle East is that this region has what China needs: oil and gas. Here, Russia is a serious competitor and can gain something, but it's not enough to matter in the long run. Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz puts it in a unique position, allowing it to influence global trade and geopolitics in a way that is disproportionate to its actual size and military power projection capabilities. In 2024, the flow of oil through the strait averaged 20 million barrels per day, which is equivalent to about 20% of the world's liquid oil consumption. At first glance, any disruptions in this vital waterway should benefit Russia as an oil exporter. If Iran tries to block or significantly disrupt movement through this key strait, oil prices could soar above $100 per barrel, possibly reaching record highs close to $150 as they did in 2008. In theory, higher oil prices would mean more revenue for the Russian military treasury, but in practice it's much more complicated. Although Russia can export oil, it is China that supports trade between the Middle East through the Hormuz Strait, along with other Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa members such as India. Moreover, South Korea and Japan, two long-standing United States allies with defense pacts, also rely on supplies from the Saravian Peninsula. About one-fifth of the world's liquefied natural gas trade also passed through the Hormuz Strait in 2024, mainly from Qatar. When Europe cut off supplies of Russian gas through pipelines, it began to use Qatar as one of its main suppliers. And this is where the nightmare scenario for Putin lies. If both Russia and the Middle East are cut off from the legal global trade in oil and gas, major economies will start looking for other sources. Countries like Canada, Brazil, and Norway are major oil exporters that are not involved in international wars or geopolitical conflicts. They can position themselves as much more attractive alternatives to Russian oil on the global market. While Russia faces an increasingly complex web of sanctions, shadow fleets, and international isolation, these countries can offer stable, sanction-free energy supplies to concerned global markets. The Russian Ministry of Finance has already lowered its forecast for oil and gas revenues for 2025 to 8.32 trillion rubles. This amounts to $101.47 billion, or 3.7% of Russia's gross domestic product, which is 10 or 94 trillion rubles. $139 billion, or 5.5% of gross domestic product due to falling oil prices and declining demand. The crisis around Iran threatens to accelerate this trend. If global buyers start looking for stable alternatives to both Iranian and Russian oil, Russia will find itself in the worst position. It has higher production costs due to sanctions and international isolation, and its access to markets is constantly shrinking as buyers prefer more reliable suppliers. Even China, Russia's largest energy client, is already using this advantage to demand significant discounts on oil from Moscow. Russia's ability to maintain oil revenues despite sanctions depends almost entirely on the so-called shadow fleet. This is a huge armada of old, often unfit for service tankers that transport Russian oil under foreign flags to avoid detection. The scale of this operation is staggering. According to some estimates, between 350 and 600 Russian shadow vessels are used to transport crude oil, which makes up almost a fifth of the world's fleet involved in maritime crude oil transportation. The shadow fleet is targeting the European Union, with some countries paying more for Russian oil through back channels than they are allocating to help Ukraine, worsening the situation. This not only circumvents sanctions, but also forms the basis of Russia's war economy. Without the shadow fleet, Moscow would have lost more than 75% of its capacity for maritime oil exports, which directly affects its ability to finance military operations.
I showed this video for so long so that you could hear the words, Russia transports its oil on the shadow fleet, that is, on ships registered in other countries. If this fleet of oil tankers, which is illegal according to international agreements and transports oil from Russia to Asia, is stopped, then Russia will have no money, either for war or, for that matter, even for peace. And Europe has decided to start tracking and stopping these ships. They have always done this in theory, but now they have decided to do it in practice. This is what two small states, two small countries with their limited capabilities have done. This is what can be achieved when you pursue the right policy and calculate your strike correctly.
The Iran-Israel conflict turns this asset into a catastrophic burden. As tensions in the Middle East escalate, the naval forces of the United States and Europe may significantly increase surveillance and interception operations throughout the region. The same waters that the shadow fleet uses to transport Russian oil to Asian markets could become hunting grounds for Western navies seeking to prevent Iranian attacks on shipping. European Union sanctions are increasingly prohibiting suspected shadow fleet vessels from accessing European Union ports. While Denmark, Sweden, Poland, Finland, Estonia, and the United Kingdom are checking the insurance certificates of oil tankers on routes used by the shadow fleet. The crisis around Iran provides the perfect excuse for a sharp expansion of these operations. The ships of the shadow fleet depend on staying out of sight, operating in international waters with minimal oversight, and maintaining plausible deniability about the origin of their cargo. But war in the Persian Gulf, one of the key hubs of maritime oil trade, means that ships will become an even more valuable resource, coming under satellite surveillance and strict interception protocols aimed at preventing the import or export of Iranian military supplies or terrorist attacks. This means that the pressure on aging Russian ships only increases with each new strike from Israel and Iran. Many of these ships are already operating at the limit of their seaworthiness. These are aging tankers with questionable maintenance and minimal safety equipment, and the crews are willing to work illegally for cash. In wartime conditions, when Western fleets are actively hunting for potential threats, these ships become easy targets. Their illegal status means they can't request naval protection, can't ask for help in international waters, and can't enter most regional ports for refueling or repairs. Considering that we are already seeing a decline in Russian oil trade, this could be the final nail in the coffin. Russia has already increased government spending on national defense to about 6.3% of gross domestic product. This is the highest level since the Cold War. This military economy is draining resources from almost every other sector to fuel the military-industrial complex. However, it is also built on two key assumptions that a conflict with Iran completely destroys. The first is that Europe will remain dependent on Russian energy exports. The second is that Russia can continue to use nuclear threats and energy blackmail to control Europe's response to the war in Ukraine. Both of these assumptions are now clearly incorrect. Gas imports from Russia to Europe have dropped from 40% in 2021 to just 11% in 2024. The European Union intends to completely stop importing Russian gas by 2027. Even more importantly, Europe has successfully dealt with several energy crises and has proven that it can function without Russian energy when necessary. Since energy suppliers from the Middle East can now also become unreliable, European countries are doubling their investments in renewable energy sources and diversified supply chains that exclude both Russian and Iranian resources. For example, Germany is considering restarting its nuclear reactors, even though it shut them down in 2023 as an indirect consequence of the Chernobyl and Fukushima disasters. But the most devastating consequence of the war with Iran for Russia is not the economy or the military sphere, it's the psychological aspect. European nations are growing disillusioned with achieving peace through only economic and military methods.
Support. Defense.
Ukraine's defense shows NATO aid may stop Russia from winning, but hasn't caused its defeat yet. In the early hours of the Iran-Israel war, the United States surprisingly made the first strategic move by destroying alleged uranium enrichment sites. This could mean that Europe will also become more
decisive.
Perhaps this won't be done through direct military action. In recent months, top European economies have been updating and boosting their military spending and readying to act independently from the United States on global geopolitical issues. This is Putin's worst nightmare. Europe, which has overcome its energy dependence on Russia, has proven its ability to withstand economic shocks and has developed the political will to take tough measures to force Russia to make concessions in Ukraine. A war in Iran would paralyze Russia's military and deprive Putin of the ability to continue the conflict in Ukraine. And when will that happen? The Russian leader, who once ruled one of the world's largest energy empires, will find himself at the head of an isolated, economically devastated country that is no longer able to project power beyond its borders.
So, gentlemen, conclusions. By 2027, Europe will stop buying Russian gas. That's wonderful. NATO countries are starting a $1 trillion rearmament and training of military personnel, and accordingly, under the leadership of the United States, they will bring back fighting spirit and capabilities to Europe. Iran has gone from being a supplier of weapons to needing them itself. China doesn't want to stop supplies from Tehran, and Europe is starting to crack down on illegal oil shipments. Sources of money in Russia are drying up, and former satellites are breaking away from Russia. This is not the end yet, of course, gentlemen, but it is a sign of serious changes happening in the world. And now the cherry on top.
Donkeys?
Yeah, no, fools, donkeys, fools.
Donkeys, donkeys, fools, donkeys and fools. Yeah, look at the two donkeys, look.
Two.
Donkeys, no, that's not it.
Behind your...
There are grazing behind your backs.
Two donkeys and two fools.
I also want to show you two donkeys or two rams, but one of them is not a ram, but a bull. Did you understand anything?
Hello friends, this is Alexander Demchenko. You are watching YouTube channels with special guest Dmitry Gordon. Today we will have a conversation as my dear and beloved Dmitry Lvovich Bykov has come to us. Dmitry Lvovich, hello, glad to see you.
Well, now we've sorted it out. One donkey and one Bykov, and immediately we have donkey meat. I mean goat meat. I mean beef.
This was not really meant for the people of Kyiv. They can no longer be influenced. It was like a salute. On the occasion of Independence Day in the United States, they decided to congratulate Donald Trump.
This salute, this bombing was not addressed to the people of Kyiv. There's nothing that can be done about them anymore. What clarity and purity of speech, everything is clear. These people say, clear speech, clear mind. It turned out that this was addressed to the President of the United States. They decided to congratulate him on United States Independence Day. Yeah, I almost got lost. This bombing was a gift to America for Independence Day. The thing is, Dmitry Bykov hasn't gone crazy. Don't get me wrong, no, he never had any sense to begin with. Talent, yes, he had talent, maybe he still does, by the way. But when it came to sense, it was always like that. Not Miramich Danchenko, more like Lvovich, I would say. Or in common speech, Zilbergrud, I think. Actually, it's funny how Dima Zilbergrud hides under the last name Bykov. Good thing it's not Byshkov. The other guy with my name is a jerk. Weinstein pretends to be Gary Casper. So thank God they're not considered Jews. Because some stains, you know, like from shit and piss, are hard to wash off.
Both Thanksgiving and Independence Day are always times of euphoria for Americans. But today the mood isn't very festive for three reasons. First of all, a huge part of the country doesn't need to pretend that the Trump sect is so unshakable, so invulnerable. A huge part of the country is disappointed in their choice, is afraid of it, and is afraid of the consequences of that choice. And they're seriously talking about the possibility of a civil split, not a war. Well, this also coincided with the adoption of a big, impressive law that terrifies about half of America.
It's wild. I have to pause here. We know that Dima Lagunishka is a liar. Well, we know that, yes. But to this extent.
Democrats woke up this morning in a rage after their beloved cable news network shattered their illusory and fragile worldview. Cable news network delivered some extremely unpleasant news to the Democrats when they had to admit live on air, based on their own polls, that Donald Trump is the most popular Republican president in history.
But you might ask, who is that? Why should you believe someone like Brandon Lackman instead of Debakov? And here's why.
Did you hear that right? They also have to admit that Donald Trump's economy, despite what so-called experts say, is simply booming. The June jobs reports once again exceeded expectations, just like every month under President Trump. Tariff revenues are rising and inflation is going down. And we know that Democrats hate objective facts, they hate the truth, so this won't really change anything. They'll still live in their anti-Trump bubble. Currently, the data is clear. Trump 2.0 is a massive success.
I mean, any politician would want to see this number here, especially if it was growing. And what about comparing with other Republican presidents?
Yeah, this is a historic event. This is a historic event. What are we talking about here? So why don't we look back? We have all the presidents, Republican presidents from the last 35, 36, 37 years. What are we talking about? The Republican Party has strongly supported this decision for 5 months. Look at this. George Bush, Senior Bush, 41 to 46%.
Let me explain. The comparison is made for this day, 5 months after the president's inauguration, and we're talking about the president's popularity on this day.
Bush, 43-59. You see Trump, Bush, 43-59. Trump, first term, 63%. He is ahead of all the other Republicans. Looking back to Reagan, Donald Trump has a higher, strongly approved rating than Ronald Reagan in 5 months. Of course, Reagan had a surge in popularity after the assassination attempt on him. So the point is, Donald Trump is making history among the Republican base. He is more loved by this Republican base than any Republican base has ever loved any Republican president. 5 months into his term, this is truly a historic moment.
So these polls are important for two different reasons. First, obviously, it pisses off the Democrats. It completely destroys their worldview. That all these Republicans regret their vote, that this isn't what they voted for, that they were deceived and misled by Donald Trump. We all knew that this thesis was just a huge self-reassurance. So, are we really supposed to believe that people who distance themselves from family members who voted for Donald Trump, who call everyone who voted for Trump Nazis, fascists, racists, misogynists, now, suddenly, they're so close to Trump supporters that they're getting all this honest feedback from them about regretting their choice? They just can't accept the reality and make up an imaginary scenario where they're the righteous ones. They always do this.
What they're doing is lying. That's what they always do, really. So, Dmitry Lvovich, we didn't expect anything different from you. You were a liar, and you still are. The way I was, I sang without any musical ear, and that's how I stayed. Bykov used to say that everyone who came to America was an idiot, calling them idiots, morons, emigrants, stinky jerks. And if someone saw an opportunity in any hole in any backwater, they rushed there right away.
America has always been proud, and God knows it had every reason to be proud of its status as a world leader. And today it turns out that there are forces in the world that are ready to simply ignore it.
At 48, Antony gave Cleopatra power over the entire world. In this case, you see...
In this case, Antony gave Cleopatra a snake. Antony gave Cleopatra suicide. Basically, nothing but a beautiful suicide remains in this situation, to die beautifully. And I start to think that the only countries that are used to living under constant bombardment are Ukraine and Israel. This is the future national elite that will determine the fate of the world, people who are no longer afraid to die.
Ukraine and Israel will determine the fate of the world because they are being bombed. Iron logic. Fact. Ukraine is being bombed. Conclusion. It will determine the fate of the world. By the way, Somalia is also being bombed. Rwanda was just bombed too, but Trump stopped it. In Congo and Rwanda, people live who are just a little bit smarter. Alexandra Demchenko and her companion.
I don't know. By the way, many Israelis who supported Trump started to see things clearly very quickly. A woman wrote today that people are beginning to understand Ukraine's plight as the country has endured this for 4 years, while others have only experienced it for 2 weeks. To be fair, they've always faced this, whether shelled by the Houthis or from Gaza. They've never truly lived in peace.
I clearly remember how Dmitry Bykov said to the Special Purpose Mobile Unit that Israel has no right to exist. And also, I look in the mirror and I think I said I'm a baptized Orthodox, but in the mirror I see a Jew. Maybe. I said a Jew or maybe a kike. I think it was unbearable for Dmitry Lvovich Zilbertrud to see that in his own mirror. Oh, what a nightmare, a kike's mug or a Mordvin's. It doesn't matter. So, can you imagine being both an anti-Semite and having a kike's mug at the same time? I mean, a Mordvin's mug. It's terrible. And also, B said that he only leaves his seed in the wombs of Slavic women because he doesn't like leaving his seed in the wombs of Jewish women. I hope I quoted it close to the original text, but if, so to speak, while making this video, I find the exact text, I'll read it to you.
As for Independence Day, I don't think America has ever in its life has faced a threat of such magnitude and with such disgrace, right?
Oh, Demchenko barked along, our beauty, so smart and educated. But that's just me, so I don't say creature, of course. Tvaruga comes from to create, while Tvaruga is from beast. By the way, here's an interesting question from the younger Gundeyev.
And Putin unzipped his pants in front of Trump. He's already swung them around. Well, now...
He's waving them, of course. What's happening now is that Russia won't back down from any of its goals. You see, probably Donald Trump also had to go through some existential horror if he said, I didn't make any progress. He always said, I'm the best negotiator. I'm the perfect diplomat. I'm brilliant. Planned my own things. Everything was brilliant, but I achieved nothing. Well, the concept changed. I screwed up. Forgive me. It's not very pleasant. That's why I think the conversation with Zelensky was, in any case, conducted in a more respectful tone than in the Oval Office.
Yes. By the way, about her, Dmitry Lvovich, listen, they didn't mention the most important thing that Putin and Trump agreed on. Well, aren't you speaking about them a bit inappropriately, too? They agreed to exchange films about the traditional values of Russia and America. Well, I would give them Brokeback Mountain for that cinema. It's a very good film. It's a gay port. They have a gay port.
Intolerance, yes. The friendship of two strong men.
Did you know that the best gift is a book like this one and like this one? And like this one and many, many other different books of mine with a signed inscription. You can get all of them at the official store of my merch, Gordon Shop. And you can also get coffee like this, a pillow like this, and many, many other things there.
And then the master of chaos himself burst in and announced that the best gift is his book. Well, or if you can't read, then a pillow with his image on it. By the way, who could have possibly thought of selling a pillow with their own image on it?
They suggested that all anti-Trump people, all critics of Trump, should simply be deported or interned or stripped of their citizenship or deported. Well, in any case, to deal with them somehow. Now, they've already started to listen, to pay attention, precisely because it's not about him being an unbeliever or about him being a rude person, but about him being a helpless person. The authorities can forgive rudeness, arrogance, or anything else, but a president cannot be forgiven for helplessness.
By the way, the idea that Trump or Make America Great Again wanted to kick people out or sort things out, I mean, we'll deal with the household matters. I haven't heard suggestions of revoking citizenship from everyone who voted for Democrats. It sounds so paradoxical and idiotic for America that only a completely brainwashed Ukrainian audience could buy it. But regarding Trump's helplessness, I want to turn again to American sources. But now I'll quote a little. First, in 5 months, Trump reduced crossings of the United States-Mexico border from 212,000 people per month to less than 8,000. That is, by 96%, 96%. Not bad for an amateur, in my opinion. Second, Asia and the Middle East have committed to investing more than $10 trillion in the American economy. They've already invested 1/1/10 trillion. By the way, that's compared to zero during Biden's time. Third, 10 leading automotive giants are building factories in the United States. They started building them after Trump came to power and announced his new policy. Semiconductor manufacturers from Taiwan are moving production to the United States, with 50% relocating factories from China to the United States. Well, a very stupid United States president and completely helpless. Fourth, the United States has started producing more oil than anyone else in the world, and that's in just 5 months. Fifth, billions in embezzlement that happened under Biden have been uncovered, and United States spending has been reduced by $1 trillion. Because that's what officials were stealing. Trump is such a fool. Yeah, he could have joined in and stolen with them, taken kickbacks like Putin does, but he's a fool and can't do anything right. Sixth, India and Pakistan made peace and nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Seventh, Rwanda and Congo ended a 30-year war in which 6 million people died, and they came to thank Trump for that. Looks like there will be another Nobel. Eighth, NATO has become stronger. And to thank Trump for that. I don't want to spend the next hour or two listing Trump's achievements, even just during this 5,000 day, the beginning of his second term. But we believe Bykov more than our own eyes, don't we?
Dmitry Ivanovich, when I observe this situation, for some reason I'm an optimist. Maybe it's for nothing, especially right now. But I still have a glimmer of hope that this could be a special operation by Trump and Zelensky. Well, with Israel, they kept silent for 2 months, and then they struck.
No, Alexander, you're not an optimist. You're a blowhard.
Well, Sash, with Israel, nothing really worked out, to be honest. They made 3 very impressive holes in the mountain. We saw them through satellite communication. It gives the impression, I'm starting to believe that publication by Felshchinsky, that there really is something on him, that he's in Putin's hands. That Independence Day now needs to be celebrated in a completely different way. We need to prove our independence from GBUKHI. Apparently, this article, even though it's purely speculative, must have had some facts behind it. And probably they really are holding him. You can't say that Israel is holding him, even though he has a lot of Jewish voters. But Putin, apparently, I don't think for a second that he's an agent named Krasnov. And all of this is made up based on a silly association with Little Red Riding Hood. It's all obvious, but the fact that apparently Russia does have some levers of influence over him, I'm afraid that's true.
You know, I'm fascinated by Bykov. He's a model of subtlety, logic, and that special Bykov grace. And this show, well, it's a conversation between Demchenko the donkey and Bykov the goat. It's titled as follows: Putin peed his pants and slapped Trump across the face. So you could assume that he first peed his pants and then slapped, or that he peed his pants, took them off, and then slapped. Well, that's 1 out of 3, so to speak.
It's called the ritual of Drozi, East and West. Chill. We've never heard of anything like that guest in Russia. Trump gathered prostitutes and made them pee on Obama's bed. Honestly, I felt a chill myself. Piranha. He and his essence are tyranny. I can see it myself. There must be a limit. Struggle is acceptable, but this crosses the line. Try saying that out loud. He walks around the Kremlin, goes to the city, and then brings prostitutes to his room, takes them to bed, and tells them, sight, basfit, that disgusting portal. He didn't call them a pile of manure for nothing, but who in the States has ever had such a powerful imagination before? Neither NTV nor... There are actually rules to the game. Imagine this brood, these whores, peeing on the bed in front of Trump. In Moscow, the land of spiritual ties, where the image of power is so beautiful and stylish. Moore is ashamed, Meryl Streep is blushing, and Stephen King is smoking on the sidelines. In Russia, they're not afraid of dirty words. They don't swoon over Olkov's mystery. But I think even Dmitry Kiselyov couldn't make something like this up. The truth has a peculiarity. People often try to forget it. A lie is logical, but the truth is bottomless. It's rough, dirty, and illogical. And so, how could such a bosh come to a very filthy mind where everything is dark and untidy? I'm inclined to believe that it's true.
Here I have finally found the address. Bykov's address was published through a literary magazine, or some kind of magazine. Yes, for some reason the second part was called I Am Pieces, but I really tried not to change it. The meaning I didn't change. Christianity was invented by the Jews. Christianity was invented by the Jews exclusively to confuse other nations. As he himself says, he is baptized Orthodox, and at the same time he says that it was the Jews who invented Christianity to confuse other nations, but he wasn't fooled, he's smarter. This is truly a devilish invention. Well, for Christians, he's a serious participant in the feast, irresistibly attractive like any apoplectic sect. Now he claims that Christianity is a sect. The drive toward death in a person is no less strong than the instinct for self-preservation. The drive toward death, meaning a person is drawn toward death. Also, if that's the case, then about 50% of people should end their lives by suicide if the drive toward death is no less strong than the instinct for self-preservation. Okay. And playing on this dark, underlying erotic passion. So he believes that there's something erotic about death, quite in the spirit of Judaism. Christianity is a deception introduced to the world. The speaker believes it's a deception after being baptized, but the listener doesn't share this view. So the Jews are telling the other Christians whom they deceived. The Jews deceived those who became Christians. With the following goal: you don't seek treasures for yourselves on earth, and in the meantime, we'll take their treasures. Well, basically, we'll rob you. You understand, right? But who gave us this ability to speak so fascinatingly to cloud other people's minds? Who made Jews? Us Jews. Who made Jews the true kings of journalism? Now he's trying to associate himself with the Jews, in my opinion. And isn't this part of the master plan? He's talking about God, I think. I feel something similar, meaning God and me. It's a transition, like God, me, yes. When I look in the mirror, about the mirror, and see in it, I have to say, oh, horror. He didn't write that, I'm saying it. And I see in it from me, oh, horror. Now he's a Jew. Think. I'll go for now to raise my Russian children, born from a native Siberian woman. Who put this urge in me to sow my seeds across more and more territories? Who put it in me? Jews. And right away, I never loved a single Jewish woman. Gentlemen, that's all. Personally, I have never discriminated against girls by nationality, by age, sometimes by appearance, by smell, by culture, or by character. Yes, there is still so much we need to learn from the prize bull Zilbertrud. Until we meet again.